I need to do it that way. Yes, we somehow managed to achieve 5-0 vote to go.
Okay, I believe that we are live streaming now. Everybody, we're live streaming.
Good evening. I welcome all of you. This is January 18th, 2024, the regular meeting for Cities Association of Santa Clara County Legislative Action Committee meeting. Scheduled time is 5:30. Thank you all for bearing with us. We were sorting out some technical issues, so we are actually starting the meeting at 5:37. And I'd like to call the meeting to order, welcoming everyone for hopefully a wonderful 2024, very productive in numerous ways. Can we have roll call, please?
Yes. Ann Bybee.
Present.
J.R. Fruin.
Present.
Pete Daly.
Here.
Stanley Mock. He did say he wouldn't be able to come. Matthew Hudes. Oh, here's
Yeah. He's on board. I'm on legislative action. Yeah.
Carmen Montano. I did know that she wouldn't come. Javed Elahi.
Present.
Mark Turner. Ellen Kamei.
Here.
Greer Stone. Peter Ortiz. He said he wouldn't be able to make it. Kathy Watanabe.
Here.
Tina Walia.
Here.
Larry Klein. He said a list that he was going to send the alternate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
With 8 members present, we have quorum.
Thank you. So the first item on tonight's agenda is to approve the minutes from the September 14th, 2023 Legislative Action Committee meeting. And this is on the consent. Are there any comments on this one? Let's take public comment, if there is anyone, Shelley.
There's no member of the public.
Okay, and those.
Just question, were the minutes attached to the agenda someplace?
Yeah, they were sent out a little bit later. Do you want to take a minute?
No, I'm just curious because I guess there's a link to the agenda, but the items that are on the agenda just sent out in a separate email.
Yeah, it was sent as a second attachment to the calendar invitation, which was an email.
Okay.
Do you want to look over the minutes first?
I found out somebody who's read it, I guess. No, I'm thinking.
Okay.
So I bring it back to the committee, and do we have a motion to approve those minutes? Motion to approve. Thank you. Thank you. Second?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch this. More? Thank you. Motion to approve the minutes from the September 14th, 2023 Legislative Action Committee meeting by Watanabe, seconded by Moore. I'm going to call you by city. Campbell?
Aye.
Cupertino?
Aye.
Los Altos?
Yes.
Los Gatos? Monte Sereno?
Okay.
Okay. Mountain View?
Yes.
Santa Clara?
Yes.
Saratoga?
Aye.
With 7 ayes and 1 abstention, motion passes. How does that work? Do we need a?
Yeah.
Is someone willing to switch their abstention?
For whoever abstained, you don't need to, you can trust your colleagues. You don't have to have read the minutes.
It just seems foolish to say that I haven't read it and then I work on it. So I guess I should read it then.
Table the item and then come back.
Yeah, why don't we do that? And I think Shelley has a hard copy. If she does, she can hand it to you. We'll come back to it maybe after a couple more agenda items. Okay, so I'd like to table this item for now and move on to item number 2, which is the year 2024 legislative outlook discussion. We're going to start with Speaker Dane Hutchins, who is the Managing Director of Rennie Public Policy Group. He's going to be joining us virtually. I'd like to take a moment to introduce Dane. Dane, thank you so much for making time to present to us this evening. Dane is the managing director with Rennie Public Policy Group. He oversees the firm's legislative advocacy and grant writing practice areas. As the chief lobbyist for the firm, Dane has successfully advanced policies for RPPG clients in several areas of importance, including transportation, land use, revenue and taxation, homelessness, and emergency response. Prior to leading RPPG, Dane was a lobbyist and federal policy liaison with the League of California Cities for nearly 5 years, working on issues including labor relations policies, privacy and technology, governmental transparency, the Brown Act, workers' compensation, and other issues related to local government operations. So Dane Hutchins, thank you so much for making time and welcome once again. And we're going to kick off this Legislative Action Committee this year with a presentation from you.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for the warm introduction. Happy to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Oh, it says host disabled participation screen sharing. So
I just enabled it.
And perfect. Confirming that folks can see my screen here.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so we'll just jump right on in here. Some of this might be familiar for folks from last year, but it's good to always sort of recap. Again, my name is Dane Hutchins. I'm the managing director of the Rennie Public Policy Group. I have the leadership team of my firm. I've got myself and two other lobbyists with pretty in-depth experience, and then a director of grant writing services. We have a fairly robust team, about 13 folks now, that specialize in municipal funding and state legislative advocacy for our clients. Jumping into the legislative calendar. So what's unique about each legislative session is a 2-year cycle. So right now we're entering the second year of a 2-year session. And so while year one is typically a time where it's kind of like going back to school for in the beginning of the year, you're getting to know your colleagues and you're catching up, and bills are sort of slowly trickling in every day. Year two, there is an entire effort to move all of the measures that failed to advance out of their original House of Origin in year one, and try to push those bills through by the end of this month. And so the moment we returned, we had policy committees commencing right away, bills that we had to go back and really kind of dig into because they had failed much earlier in the year last year. All the while you had the governor's budget proposal with a pretty staggering deficit, all within the first couple of weeks. So it really is at breakneck speed going into a year two. And so this morning, we saw in both houses bills that are trying to advance out of their House of Origin, go through the appropriations and suspense hearings this morning. Those bills will be moving onto the floor because they need to advance out of their respective houses before the end of this month. We anticipate seeing probably about 1,000 to maybe 1,200 new pieces of legislation introduced really between the time of January 30th, 31st, all the way till February 16th. Because right now lawmakers are really just focused on getting their bills out that are beholden to that deadline, and then they're going to shift their focus and start introducing new pieces of legislation for the second year of the session. And so once those bills are in print, they have to sit in print unamended for 30 days before they can be heard at a policy committee. So it gives your advocacy teams your lobbyists here and really, other stakeholders time to really assess, read, triage bills and see what's applicable, what's not, and be able to go into the process a little bit more informed. I put an asterisk here because, really as of right now, only a handful of bills have really been introduced. And so there's not a ton of new pieces of legislation to review today. I did highlight a few that I wanted to drive awareness on. But really, we're going to see about, anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500, give or take, bills introduced coming in the next couple of weeks or so. March 21st through April is that spring legislative recess, and then we'll see the governor's May revision based on updated forecasting in mid-May. And then the House of Origin deadline for 2-year bills is May 24th. And then we move right back into budget season. So for the first 6 months, it really is a pretty hectic time in Sacramento with lots of moving parts, all cast apart, that it's an election year and we've got ballot measures pending and that. So it's a busy time right now in Sacramento. And so this is the slide that I think some folks may be familiar with from last year, but really it goes to illustrate the importance of trying to engage a little bit earlier in the process. I know there's been challenges in the past with folks perhaps trying to engage on legislation perhaps in August or September or even July. A lot of times that's a little bit too late in the process to have meaningful engagement for bills that have been introduced and been moving through the process as is. Now, the exception to the rule, of course, is if you have what's referred to as a gut and amend, meaning that bills that were talking about something or dealing with unrelated policy, all of that language is stripped, and then new language is thrown into a bill that talks about a policy that is, or impacts a policy that is important to you in August or July or June. Of course, that's a time to then, rapidly engage on that piece of policy. But generally speaking, trying to engage earlier in the process, February, March, April, those are really prime times to connect with your delegation, walk through what your specific needs are, and express your either support or opposition to legislation that's pending that they may have an impact on, whether they sit on a specific policy committee or just simply having to vote for it on their respective assembly or Senate floors. So I wanted to provide a brief overview of the budget. We provided a fairly comprehensive analysis of our budget to our clients. The budget clocks in about 420 pages, and we were able to synthesize that to about 13 pages. But it's still fairly complex, given that our budget is really the size of most small countries, a few small countries combined. But going into the session, the Legislative Analyst's Office predicted about a $68 billion deficit. The administration, sort of through their own true-ups and drawing from reserves, calculates that at about 37.9 billion in total shortfall. So 38 billion, not as bad as 68 billion, but certainly a large gap to try and bridge. And so the areas that are, I think, most important to this organization, I wanted to highlight. So we're seeing some delays in ongoing funding, whether it be for HAP funding, behavioral health funding, 1.2 billion in proposed cuts in housing related funding. So I am particularly for some of my clients in the region, trying to get some of that bridge funding for affordable housing development. It's already competitive enough. And so seeing, 200 million from the infill infrastructure grant program is really a big hit. It's something I think cities who are looking to try and do infill building should very much want to try and work with your lawmakers to try to restore that funding. So that's one thing I wanted to highlight there. Other things is sort of more the climate space. Maintains 7.3 billion of the 8.7 billion dollar commitment for drought and floods. So there is a reduction there. For transportation funding, 13.6 billion for transportation investments. Although there is a $200 million reduction in the active transportation program, and so I know that for our clients, particularly our grant service clients, ATP is a big program that a lot of jurisdictions are looking to apply to. So again, these are sort of programs that inherently go to local governments, and though we're seeing those, the governor proposing to close the gap by reducing or eliminating funding for some of these big programs. ZEV infrastructure is another one. While it does maintain the 10 billion in investments, you're delaying funding of 600 million till fiscal year 27-28. So that you can call it a delay, you can call it a reduction. In the short of it, the money is just not going to be available in the near future for specific projects through either competitive or non-competitive programs. One note I did want to highlight: there was an enhancement of law enforcement funding, 373.5 million over 4 years to combat organized retail theft. This is something that has been polling considerably well throughout the state with respect to potential reforms to Prop 47. Organized retail crime has been something that a lot of local officials are grappling with and try to figuring out how to deal with that. And so there is an enhancement in budget and potential grant funding opportunities for the organized retail theft grant. So other measures to taken to address the shortfall. So again, $13 billion in reserves are being used. Overall spending cuts of 8.5 billion, 5.7 billion from borrowing from internal funds, and then deferring or pushing out 2.1 billion in spending to later fiscal years. And so playing a little magic here. We're trying to alter and push out funding to later years in hopes that we see a rebound in the economy and the fiscal position of the state to be able to make good on some of those investments. Again, additional 5.1 billion in delays, 3.4 billion in fund shifts. And so, the governor was fairly optimistic in his his proposal on the 10th. He anticipates the May revise having a rebound of some of these numbers. And so throughout the budget process, right now there will be budget hearings commencing. In fact, I'll go to the next slide here. There will be budget hearings starting to try and figure out, okay, now that the governor has presented his plan to close this gap, legislative budget committees are going to be meeting and trying to modify these budget bills to try and have their own stamp on the process. When in mid-May, when the governor releases the updated forecasts, it really sparks another round of budget hearings. And then by June 15th, the legislature needs to pass its approved budget to the governor, and then the governor has 15 days to either sign or veto the budget. He will not veto the budget. That would trigger some constitutional triggers that would eliminate all state worker pay and state lawmaker pay. And so vetoing the budget is not in the cards, but there will be ongoing negotiations on with the administration, the legislature, and of course, stakeholders who have a vested interest in different pots of funding. So a quick snapshot of what's happening in the legislature. So we have sort of major legislative themes relevant to the city's association: housing, homelessness issues, governmental operations issues such as Brown Act and Public Records Act reform, and public safety. So again, there's just really a small handful of bills that are relevant right now that will absolutely change as we move in the next couple of months. But for now, just a couple I wanted to touch on. So there's several spot bills in the world of housing right now. So we're seeing stuff in housing. We think we're going to be seeing bills on housing production. There's a bill out there on preliminary fee estimates, which would require local agencies when someone tries to apply for a permit, a building permit, that the agency needs to respond back with what fees would be approximate. They have to do so within 10 days time. Again, still trying to flesh out the specifics of that bill. It's not yet fully cooked, but that's something that we're starting to see. Rapid rehousing, anything to try and really tackle the unhoused and homelessness issue that we're seeing. Of course, density bonus and inclusionary zoning, Surplus Lands Act. There was some big stuff in Surplus Lands Act last year, but I do know that there's really two sides of Surplus Lands Act, and both sides are really eager to continue to try to have those conversations. So we're likely going to see more bills in and around Surplus Lands Act. Building codes and inspections, housing financing and new housing programs. Again, this is something that the legislature wants to do. When you factor in some of those budget constraints and what the governor is proposing to reduce funding, those might be vetoed at the end of the year if they can't, if we don't see a rebound in funding. And then, of course, there's a housing bond that's still being proposed. It's likely that, given the timing, it would not make it for the 2024 ballot, but there is certainly conversations ongoing with respect to getting a comprehensive bond on the ballot for perhaps 2026. Moving on to Brown Act. And so I wanted to flag this bill, AB 817 by Assemblymember Pacheco. So this was a bill, as I referenced at the top of the presentation, that was introduced last year, but did not advance out of the Assembly Local Government Committee. Actually, it was not heard in the Assembly Local Government Committee last year. The sponsors of the measure, one of which is one of our clients, so we've been working on this bill quite closely. Had continued working with the new chair of Assembly Local Government, and now the bill has advanced out on an 8-0 vote. It is now on the Assembly floor and is poised to advance out of the Assembly and over to the Senate before the 30th. And so this is a bill that would allow your city jurisdictions, those advisory bodies that you have, those non-decision making bodies, all your appointed advisory boards, to continue to meet fully remote without posting physical location. And so this is a bill that comes from a place of trying to enhance sort of civic participation, allow folks from diverse backgrounds that may not otherwise be able to meet in person to get a taste for engaging in local government. And we know that folks that serve on some of these advisory bodies, they're usually pretty active participants in our communities, and it's also a good sort of a feed into perhaps seeking a council seat one day. So trying to broaden the pool, increase diversity on our boards and commissions is something that I think is a laudable goal and is certainly enjoyed support from really all of the local government stakeholders out there. And so conversations are ongoing. The bill did need to take an amendment that aligns with new state standards. So there is a January 1, 2026 sunset date. However, we would anticipate that since the state has passed a bill last year allowing their advisory bodies to meet remotely, and it has the same sunset, the logic here is to tie those sunsets together and then continue to expand those sunsets, assuming that the legislature agrees that it continues to be a good idea. So more to come on that. So Public Records Act. So I did want to bring this bill up because Senator Cortese is a member of the delegation, but SB 908. So this is an interesting one. This one just was newly introduced, so it does again have to sit unamended for the next 30 days. But this goes to, I believe, try and codify some provisions in the California Supreme Court case from the city of San Jose with respect to messages on personal devices. I think, however, that the policy approach, it may be some challenges from an implementation standpoint, because it prohibits not only elected officials, appointed officials, but every employee of a public agency from creating or sending any public records document or legislative record, which are very broad definitions, on a non-electronic messaging system, unless a copy is sent to some sort of central repository would then be accessible to the California Public Records Act. I think on initial review of this one, I think just from a compliance standpoint, given the, it is so expansive to every single employee or appointed official, it can be very difficult to comply with. And so have not got a sense as to who's yet sponsoring this bill, or who has asked the senator to introduce this bill. But this is something that it will be certainly top of mind for a lot of the state organizations, to try and understand what the genesis is. Is there a way to try and find a reasonable compromise? As we all know, the Public Records Act is certainly important and valuable. Want to ensure we're being transparent, but the implementation, the risk of litigation for failing to comply with records requests, especially some of these voluminous requests. This bill is poised to really set off some litigation across the state, which I know frivolous litigation is nothing that we are fans of. So another area of interest in in public safety. So there has been a select committee on organized retail theft. The governor has called upon the legislature. This was actually, he did so through a few different press releases, but I think it just kind of got lost in the shuffle with the budget and everything else that's happening. But he did call on the legislature to send him bills to strengthen laws around public safety and organized retail crime. There have been ongoing discussions with respect to Proposition 47 shoplifting definitions, and then some of the pandemic-related crime rise. This is something that I think on with a lot of different policies, there's sort of the pendulum that swings back and forth. I think that folks are now, there's more and more pressure being put upon the legislature to be a little bit more reactive to what they're hearing locally with the uptick in organized retail crime. So there should be, we anticipate several bills around this, especially now that the governor has provided really kind of political cover to say, send me bills. I want bills on these issues. But they certainly want to be thoughtful through that process to make sure we're not going backwards, but still ensuring that we're not sticking to the status quo. One measure that was introduced that I did want to flag is Senate Bill 905 by Senator Wiener. So this would actually make forcibly entering a vehicle with the intent to commit theft a crime punishable by imprisonment in county jail or in state prison. Again, when Senator Wiener has been really one of the most progressive members in the legislature. So this one I flagged and looked at who was co-authoring the bill. It's being co-authored by the Senate Minority Leader, and several Republicans and several Democrats are supporting this measure. This is a little bit of a different, I believe, looking at the language, it's a little bit of a different twist on current law. I mean, right now, obviously, it's illegal to forcibly break into a car. Looking at the code sections referenced, I believe that this is trying to address issues whereby folks are living in their car, and then folks are breaking, other folks are breaking into those cars. It's a little, the bill is pretty short, but the author has not yet released a fact sheet or a public statement as to what the end goal is for this law. But there is a very broad swath of co-authors on this, and something that will certainly be top discussion as we move through the legislature. So shifting gears here to Proposition 1, part of why I wanted to do a quick refresher on Prop 1 is, number one, the governor's budget does predicate a lot of is predicating the balancing of the budget on the enactment of Proposition 1. I mean, he is putting all his cards, all his chips on the table for this one, and is really trying to get this bond passed. In fact, there were other bonds or other ballot measures that could have qualified for the March primary, but were pushed to November. All indications are that the governor wanted to have just one proposal on the table for voters to make a decision, and so this is a measure that was placed on the ballot with two pieces of legislation from last year, so AB 531 and SB 326. The Irwin Bill 531 is the funding mechanism. SB 326 Eggman is the policy mechanism of the bond, which overhauls the Mental Health Services Act. And so this is a $6.38 billion bond. We were successful in getting about $1.5 billion included in this bond last year for local governments, specifically for cities and counties to create different types of housing to address some of these issues. But it is something that, from our understanding, it's polling very well. The only concern we had at the time that we renew our concern is that 6.38 billion isn't enough to really solve the problem. But again, this was the number that was settled on, and this is what voters will be deciding as we move into the March primary. So the last thing I wanted to cover is an emerging issue that some of you, and I wanted to bring this up because while it doesn't impact city operations or city governance, this is something that I know that almost all of my clients have raised as a concern. This is something that they are starting to now hear from their constituents, and so with that lens, I wanted to brief you on AB 205, which was an energy budget trailer bill that was passed actually in 2022, which would grant a utility income graduated fixed charge. And so I'll jump into that and tell you what's going on there. And this is just more of an FYI, but again, it's something that we've been hearing quite a bit on. And so now we've really had to dig into the proceedings and provided a fairly comprehensive memo to our clients detailing all this, but I'm give you some of the snapshots of what's happening. So on June 20th of 2022, AB 205, or I'm sorry, I believe that should say June 30th. AB 205 was signed into law. And so what it did was it removed what is in current law for jurisdictions who reside in investor-owned utility areas, a $10 per month fixed charge, additional charge on all ratepayers to try and help subsidize lower income folks. So this new law requires the PUC to establish no less than 3 income categories no later than July 1 of this year. And so while the intent here was to try and make electrification affordable for subsidizing electricity for lower income folks, it doesn't incentivize reduction in usage. And so what happens is that irrespective of how much energy you're using, you're paying the same. And in fact, those in lower income brackets will be paying less money for their utility bills for using the same amount of energy. And folks who will be paying, folks that are in these income brackets will be paying considerably more for their energy costs for using the same amount of energy. And so it does create a particular challenge. And so I know PG&E has shared a lot about this, and I know PG&E is in most of the territory in the county. So I wanted to spend a little time on this because from a timing perspective, this is really, it makes it very difficult for advocates and to understand and engage, and really even lawmakers themselves to really comprehend some of perhaps the outcomes that are happening for some of these budget trailer bills. And so to put this in perspective, going back and looking at the legislative history, this language was amended into AB 205 along with 50 or 47 other pages of really comprehensive, dense language on Sunday evening of the 26th of June. On the 27th, it was reviewed and passed by the Senate Budget Committee. And on the 29th, it passed off the Senate floor and the Assembly floor with really no public engagement or comment, and it was signed on the 30th. And so, now you're looking at this saying this is a very comprehensive and policy that likely would have benefited for more stakeholder engagement in the process. But because it was done through the budget process, it was done so in a very, very truncated timeline. And so, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time on that. And what I put here on the third box here, WORF, what this means here is without reference to file, meaning that rules were waived. It wasn't even file noticed. It was just grabbed and thrown onto the floor to vote and move on. And so this is some of that stuff that really happens from a process standpoint. On this one, while I always promote us getting engaged early, on this one, it happened so darn quickly that there really wasn't time for anybody, for stakeholders to engage on this issue. And so the current pricing proposal from PG&E, what they have proposed as their fixed rate charges for through the PUC and its proceedings, would have a fixed monthly rate starting at $13 and capping at $51 per month. So depending on your income bracket, you could be paying as little as $13 extra per month on your utility bill, or as high as $51 per month on your utility bill as a baseline fixed charge, and then your normal rates would accrue on top of that bill. Just for reference, SDG&E suggested ranges from $24 to $73, and Southern California Edison proposed the $10 charge, which was previous law, up all the way up to $51. And so, by contrast, PG&E is somewhere kind of in the middle between SDG&E and SCE, but collectively, this would represent the highest fixed charge in the country. So, it's certainly something that I think once the rulemaking process began, I think lawmakers themselves were a little shocked at that sort of that sticker shock of what they're seeing of how those brackets would look. And so, under sort of from a timing perspective, as I'd mentioned, there will be the PUC must codify its decision no later than July 1 of 2024, and it is expected that a tentative rule will be announced in the early spring. There is rising opposition to this. There is a letter of over 200 organizations sent a letter to the PUC opposing the fixed rate charges. On October 27th, 22 members of the Assembly sent a letter to the PUC, including both Assembly members Berman and Evan Lowe from the delegation signed that letter. In addition, Assembly members Berman and Becker authored an op-ed in November of last year, really outlining their concerns with the approach the PUC took through the rulemaking process. And so, there is, an opportunity here through the budget process to sort of undo this program. The legislature does have that power through the budget process to pass a new bill that essentially repeals this to where it all goes away, or to try to make tweaks. But right now, if nothing's done as of July 1, we're going to be seeing new rates imposed. From an implementation standpoint, one of the things that was noted from the opposition is that there are privacy and data concerns with income verification. That would be very challenging. Of course, this is now another high cost on working families across the state too. So it's certainly something that, while again, it doesn't necessarily impact city operations, I've had almost virtually every client reach out and say, hey, what's going on with this? We're hearing a lot of this in our community. So wanted to provide a little bit more background on that. And again, thank you so much for the opportunity to present. Happy to answer any questions, and or I can let you be on your way.
Dave, thank you so very much. That has been an extremely informative presentation here. And I'm going to open the floor for questions right now. I know there was one question on my right.
I think it was answered.
Okay, other questions? Yes, please.
Yeah, hi, this is Alyssa Cisneros, Sunnyvale City Council. So I have a couple questions about the ATP reduction. So what does this mean in terms of eligibility? So my question is, when they made the reductions, did they have a prioritization in which, what kind of funding was kept? Was there a certain policy goal? For example, is the granting now more focused on equity or lower resourced areas, or were the cuts more across the board?
That's a great question. So I suppose I don't have an answer for you yet. And the reason why is because where we're at in the budget process is that as of today, nothing has been cut. What we're seeing here is this is the governor sort of opening salvo on what he is proposing. And so we have not yet seen, so the governor's proposal says, we want to reduce ATP by 200 million. What will eventually come out of that will be a series of what's known as budget trailer bills. So the transportation budget bill will be dense. It'll have the governor's proposal on that specific question on what he proposes to be reduced. From there, that budget trailer bill will be discussed and negotiated through both the Assembly and Senate transportation budget subcommittees. So that's our opportunity to provide public comment, engage with those committees to try to fight for, to push back on perhaps that proposal or try to make some of those tweaks. But it's too early to tell the specifics on whether it be across the board cuts or specific areas in which ATP would be reduced.
Yeah, and I guess I should have phrased it if Newsom had elaborated on his rationale, but it sounds like he didn't. And that we do have to wait for those trailer bills to understand, which is a little unfortunate because I love it when he does give some insight into where his mind is, because I like thinking about where that possibility is. Anyway, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Of course.
And then going to Prop 1, it's really interesting that there could be funds there for local jurisdictions to apply this to housing. And housing is behavioral health. And I wanted to dig into a little bit more of that and what that means precisely. So there's a couple ways to look at this. Is it focused on housing? And you don't necessarily need to know the answer to this, right? Because it's more about a definition. But is the thought around permanent supportive housing that provides direct behavioral health services? Or is this looking even more broadly and saying housing is a behavioral health need? It is a mental health need for people. And so housing people with mental health disorders would be important. So even if it's not supportive of providing direct services, those funds could go toward that kind of project. Or do they need to have services attached?
The service is attached, and so yeah, it's for that. It's for permanent supportive housing, and that's where the direct tie is. And but they do anticipate, because of what SB 326 did by expanding the definition of who's eligible to be housed under the Mental Health Services Act. Even folks with substance abuse problems could be potentially included. It's very. I mean, the SB 326 was, I want to say it was about 125-page policy bill. I mean, it's very, very, very dense. But if I recall, part of SB 326 clarifies that if you have extreme substance abuse problems, whether that be drugs or alcohol, that can actually show that to impair your mental capacity or state, then you would qualify. So it's a fairly large expansion. And so the anticipation behind that is that you're going to need more permanent supportive housing because you're expanding that definition.
Certainly, and clinically, you would call that a dual diagnosis. So identifying people who are, addiction is a symptom or of a greater disorder. So that actually makes total sense to me, but that's very interesting. how that's defined. I think it's helpful because that's where we see a lot in our communities of behavioral health showing up, you know, especially in our unhoused populations, right? Wanting to give priority to those who would really struggle in any other way to get housing. The one final question, AB 205, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me generally, but I will focus on one question here. Would this be in lieu of low-income utility subsidies that already exist to go ahead or reduce or eliminate utility rates for those of low income? So would those programs necessarily go away, or would those still exist for those who are paying this this lower tier rate?
So it's sort of I'm using a Affordable Health Care Act term here, but it's a repeal and replace. So that's the approach here. So because under current law, the $10 fixed charge those are the funds that are used to subsidize. And so what we're seeing here is the repeal of that $10 fixed charge, replacing it with this graduated charge that is based on household income. And then those excess dollars are going to further fund those programs, which would actually result in a reduction in current energy utility rates for those low-income individuals. But they would still be using the same amount of power. And I think that's where there's a more of a broader policy concern from the lawmakers who I don't think, given the timing and when they passed it in a pretty truncated time, we're a little shocked at PUC's interpretation of the direction they gave in that piece of legislation.
Yeah, it seems to contradict a number of other, goals that the state has. So it's gonna be really interesting to watch that one shape out. And I guess I have one other question on it. It was mentioned the privacy concerns and the income verification, which when you think about it is a massive undertaking for something like this, because you have to categorize people like necessarily in order to charge them. So who would be responsible for footing the bill to go ahead and have that and do that undertaking, which is income verifying everyone who gets a utility bill?
Yeah,
also,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. Yeah, who pays for that? Is that going to be Sunnyvale's responsibility? Is that PG&E's responsibility?
Now I would have to go back and we may have covered that in our memo that we provided to clients, but I believe part of the fixed charge that is being proposed by the IOUs is to account for that piece of income verification, an additional administrative charge. And so again, when you're talking about a utility verifying income, there's going to have to be some sort of data sharing with at the very least, CDTFA over, or the state, or, there's going to have to be some way to try and verify income. These proceedings have not shined a really clear light on how that would work, but I believe given part of the fixed fee charge is going to try and go to administrative costs to cover income verification.
Yeah, no, I did a lot of deep work very early on in the state education longitudinal data system. So creating the data things, and my head's just exploding with so many problems. I'm like, wow, this doesn't feel like it's in a reality that I recognize. Anyway, that's all of my questions. Thank you so much for answering them. That was very helpful.
I hope I could be helpful. I know you asked very specific questions, which I love, but I took notes because if I don't know the answer, I commit to try to find the answer. So if you need any more, of course, feel free to reach out. I can do a little bit more digging on that.
Of course, like as it goes through the process, just kind of flagging those questions of like, oh, this is what might be important from a city perspective. So it was all helpful.
Wonderful. And if you do send the answers, I think the best way is to send them to Shali so she can share with everyone on the committee. Then thank you once again. Other questions from the committee, Rob?
One quick question on Prop 1. This is simple and might just be on the internet, but do you have a sense of that 1.5 billion that's going to cities? Do you know how the breakdown is going to be? Is it proportional? A lot of our cities are small to medium-sized cities. Do you have any sort of sense of how much we could potentially get from that?
Okay. Again, I know that actually, listen, no, hold on. No, no, the short answer is I don't know the answer right now off the top of my head, but I do know because I specifically remember we did probably a 4-page analysis, very detailed analysis for our clients on Prop 1. And actually reattached it to our budget story that we gave to our clients last week that allocates that breakdown. I don't know if it's traditional funding formulas, but traditionally speaking, there is sort of a set aside for the Big Ten, and then it sort of trickles down from there. That's traditionally how how these fundings work, and that's if you are willing to take the by right provisions to use that funding along with the prevailing wage requirements. So, a jurisdiction that wants this funding would still need to be okay with the by right provisions as well as the labor requirements for construction. But I can't offhand tell you what the breakdown is going to be specifically for each jurisdiction.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Dane. We got a well-educated group here, another one coming from Ellen.
Hi, Dane. It's Ellen. How are you? Happy New Year.
Oh, good. Hi, Ellen. Happy New Year.
Hi. So, sorry, quick question. I don't think that I missed it. Is there any buzz about Senate Bill 926, the Wahab bill? I think she started it as a gut amendment and then brought it back and introduced it as 926 about the transit,
Dead.
consolidating the transit agencies.
Dead.
Is that going to have any
It's dead. We're being recorded, so I won't give my unbridled opinion, but not a good bill. So yeah, it is not moving forward this year. Now that is to say we have till February 16th. The senator is more than it's within her right to reintroduce a brand new vehicle, but that was something that all transit agencies and a lot of individual governments came out very strongly in opposition, and so it was pulled from committee and it will not advance this year in that vehicle of 926.
Okay, sorry. Is it recently dead? Because I didn't know.
So what happened was it wasn't it never was. It was pulled from the Senate Transportation Committee, and so technically tomorrow it will be dead, but there's no Senate Transportation Committee tomorrow. So that's.
I was like, am I that behind? I was like, because I knew it was getting drama. Okay, thank you.
Of course.
I appreciate the fun that it will show up on a different vehicle.
Ellen, you and I will talk offline, and I can give you the.
Oh yeah, can't wait.
Yeah, I think it was just something written about it today.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. But I didn't get to read the whole article. But Proposition 1 is definitely a popular topic tonight. So I have a question related to this, Dane. So of the 6.38 billion bond, how how does the governor expect to collect that money? Is it going to be through a parcel tax or some other source of revenue? And do you know how it's going to impact the voters?
General obligation bond issued by the treasurer. They typically, I have not seen the LAO's analysis or the AG's analysis on the bond. I know there's that actually wouldn't apply. There was a bill last year that changes what you see on the ballot for local ballot measures with respect to, as opposed to X amount for every $100, it's X amount per every $100,000 of property value. But that's a local bond issue. So for general obligation bonds, I'm not sure how the descriptions are going to read or what the initial impact is, but it is a general obligation bond, and I don't believe it's tied to individual property, because that's a local tax measure, or local bond measure is usually how they securitize it with property tax funds.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, let's open for any public comments if we have.
No members of the public have comments.
Okay. Let's move on. Again, Dane, thank you so very much for your very in-depth presentation and discussion and responses to so many questions from a very educated group of elected officials here. Thank you so very much. And
Of course.
I think Shari has something to say. I guess one request is if we can have the presentation.
Yes, so I was just gonna say, I got the presentation this morning.
Oh, you did?
So I just wanted to, I will email it after today's meeting to everybody.
Okay, wonderful. So an extra thanks right there, Dane, for sending the
Hey.
presentation ahead. Bye.
Of course, and Charlie, actually, I emailed you. I found one typo I wanted to correct, so I'll send you the updated version now, and then you can distribute that to folks. So thank you all again, very much appreciated, and happy to help if you have any questions, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, and that was June 30th, right? The typo.
Say that again?
Pointed out earlier. You did mention one of the typos, the date June 30th from 2022.
Yes.
No. Yeah,
Wait,
never mind.
I missed the punchline. I'm sorry. I'm gonna get out while I'm still ahead.
That's okay. That's okay. You're very thorough and you're all deeply appreciative of that.
Take care.
Thanks. Okay, moving on. Item number 3, it's an overview of Cities Association Legislative Action Committee process discussion and perhaps possible action tonight. And the presenter tonight is our Honorable Cities Association of Santa Clara County Board President, Nisa Flagler. Thank you, Nisa, for being honored to present.
Thank you, Honorable Chair Malia, for the introduction. Hi, everybody, Nisa Flagler, and I'm making this presentation not because I am this year's board president, but because I've served as LAC chair, so I've sat in this chair that Tina is sitting in twice on the Citizens Association board. And so she asked me just to give an overview. I see a lot of return members here who have served on this committee before, so you know how it works. But for the new members who are joining us, we just wanted to make sure you understood what the committee is, what it does, and how we work together. And I thought the presentation to kick it off was really good because it sets the calendar and gives you an idea of the types of bills that will be making their way through the legislature this year. So LAC, the Legislative Action Committee, you're the body that reviews, discusses, identifies ballot measures or bills that you want the Citizens Association to consider and take a position on. And then you make a recommendation to the board. So you don't actually make that final decision, you make the recommendation to the board, you take a vote, it's simple majority. And then the LAC chair will take it to the board meeting, which normally follows the LAC meeting, and will submit the recommendation. And then the board actually gets to vote on the Citizens Association position and how we want to move it forward. I will tell you, LAC is the most sought after Citizens Association group. The Citizens Association does a lot of wonderful things, as you know, but this is core to what we do, advocating on behalf of our cities taking positions. And as someone who has served as LAC chair, I can tell you, or state representatives, local groups, and nonprofits, they seek you out. They will reach out to Tina, and if they know you serve on the Citizens Association, they'll ask you as well, because they recognize that this is one forum where they have all cities in one room, and they can bring their bills, ballot measures, whatever proposition, and advocate, and hopefully we can take a position and they can say the Citizens Association, which consists of the cities in Santa Clara County, supports it, opposes it, makes these recommendations. So I just wanted you to know you are sitting in the seat of very important work, so thank you. Each city does this differently, and so we leave it up to each city how they vote on the different bills, propositions, and ballot measures. I can say, I am not the representative on LAC. My Vice Mayor Pete Daly is, and I can tell you for Los Altos, for example, the representative on LAC would not vote on a measure, bill, or proposition unless the council has taken a position on it. And there are 3 ways to look at it. So I would say most, if not all, cities representatives will vote and take a position on a matter if it's consistent or aligned with a similar issue your council has voted on. So it may not be exactly the same bill or issue, but if it's similar enough to a position their council has taken, the LAC members feel comfortable voting on it. Majority of representatives will take a position even if their council has not. And this has changed over the years because I do think it depends on the council, the composition of the council, and the representative, how comfortable they feel. But I would say generally, for the last couple of years, majority of the LAC members, even if their council has not taken a position, they will feel comfortably enough voting on a bill or taking a position. But then there are minority cities like Los Altos where I know I need my council to take a position on a particular bill or measure before I can represent their vote, because each of you represents your own cities and city council. So that's where we always get that question. And so what you find city representatives will do on LAC is they'll abstain, if their council hasn't taken a position. How we communicate, how Citizens Association, so this is the board, but it's good for everybody here to understand our positions, and we will, vote to support, oppose, support with amendments, oppose with amendments. And so this group really gets into the weeds sometimes, and Tina is going to have to manage all of you, especially when it comes to, of course, housing bills, and really figuring out, okay, we want to support it, but we would love to see these changes. And of course, we want all voices, small cities, large cities, voices heard, because how this all gets communicated to our state representatives is through letters. And so in those letters that Tina will draft with myself, we outline, we don't just say we support the bill or we oppose the bill. We actually, say who we are, explain some of the discussion that happened at the meeting. So it's a very substantive and thought through letter that I know our representatives read. I remember 2 years ago, Pat Bird and I and a couple other people, I don't know if Javed was there, we went to Sacramento for Ledge Day, and we went out to lunch with all these different representatives. I don't know if Kathy was there. And I remember a couple of them saying, no, we look for letters from the Citizens Association, right? It's a one-stop shop. We want to see your position and the concerns you have. And to that point, and going back to the calendar that our PPG showed, he is right that ideally we want to get these letters out and communications out to the representatives or some local measure, before the summer. But there are a lot of times in August, that's when staff is reaching out to us, because honestly, that's when a lot of them are just paying attention, right? Or representatives. And so they're like, what did you want to change here? And so sometimes even in August, you guys will be having a substantive discussion based on the changes and amendments that have evolved since the start of this process. Two more things, it's up to the chair on how this group identifies the bills, propositions, and measures you want to discuss. Every chair has done it differently. I did it differently. Larry Klein, who is chair, has done it differently. So it's up to Tina and the rest of you to really decide the bills you want to put on your agenda this year. I will say, in addition to the bills, you identify groups, and this is an election year, lots of ballot measures. People will want to come to this group to present, and the chair will have opposition, proponents, and have that discussion. But that's how you decide, the bills, but also people will ask to get on your agenda. And then the last thing, it's managing the bill process. And I think Tina is going to go into this somewhat, but I wanted to cover just the number of bills. Like RPPG touched on the bills they thought are relevant to Citizens Association, and those are really good bills to watch. But there are a lot of bills, you know what I mean? And, we all have 10 other things we were doing, and staying on top of the different bills can be exhausting and time consuming. And so it's just really for your purpose and in the interest of all our citizens, it's zooming in on the bills, whatever's going to drive that you really think impact our cities here in Santa Clara County, we want to take a position on, because I do think we'll have a more fruitful and productive discussion when we focus on those bills and not spread ourselves too thin. I remember one year I was chair and we had a long list of bills that we just never got to, right? And we would love to get to all bills, because state bills, some way, somehow may, have the likelihood of affecting us as Santa Clara County cities. But just keep that in mind, that there are a lot of bills out there, and we need to be mindful of the timeline, the calendar, and also our own calendars and time capacity. So with that, Chair, do you have anything to add? Did you want me to cover anything?
I think that is just wonderful. I was there is a separate item 4, so I'll just add a couple of sentences there, but you've taken a lot of that here, so this is fabulous. Okay.
Any questions about the process in general?
So looking at that timeline that they presented, how often does this body meet, and when will we kind of look at those, talking about the kind of like April being the best timeline? Are we gonna have a meeting, in that kind of realm when we talk about the, 15 hot bills that we need to decide on?
Okay, I'm going to bring in information from the next item, and that way we can save time because it makes sense right now. The next item, number 4, I'm not rolling into that, but I'll just mention it. That's the 2024 LAC agenda and calendar. And the 2 things that I was going to say there was, I'll start with the meeting dates. The tentative meeting dates are with us tonight, and we meet typically every other month. So let's just say tentative what we have. Every month?
Except for February, we're just kidding.
Oh, except February. Okay. Oh, I didn't see no meeting. Okay, so we meet every month except for Feb, and we go through, there's no meeting in October tentatively, and we go through November. This is a tentative calendar because this has to go to the Cities Association Board for approval, the whole calendar. That's the answer to your question. And the other bit I'll add right now, because Nisa covers a lot of this, my approach this year is going to be for the LAC members to indicate the bills that they are interested in working in as a group. That way we as a group can have that discussion and focus on just a few. And I'll stop right there.
Very helpful, thank you.
Does that answer the question?
Absolutely.
Right. Other questions for you?
And can I just add, so Rob, just looking, so we don't have a meeting in February, but as you work with the chair to identify the bills you want to discuss, and we through April, May, June, we can send letters and reach out, until September. As a group, you will decide what bills you want to discuss and recommend positions on, and move those forward. And so it's really up to this group. What do you think are the ones you really want to take a position on early? And Tina will be tracking where those bills are, which ones require more urgent action than others. Yeah.
Great. And then just one quick follow-up. So then if there's something we missed and it becomes a big, issue in the state of California, that's when we kind of do the August sort of, support or oppose sort of thing.
So one thing that was very helpful, Lisa, when you were running this thing is, for every meeting, you sent some of the important bills that you thought we should be considering and a little blurb on each of those bills. So that would be helpful if you can continue that and get it to us, in decent time so that we can review that and are prepared to discuss it.
I will leave that out. So one of the things, and it's up to Tina how she wants to do things, up to Chair Walia. But to the point I made earlier, that there are some city representatives who will not take positions unless their councils have voted on it. Because I wanted to preempt that and minimize the abstentions at LAC, I would actually send the bills in advance so that they could bring it to their councils, and put it on their agenda so they could take a position. So by the time they came to LAC the following month, they would be able to vote on it. So that's something I would try to do 3 weeks in advance after this meeting. I would try to identify what bills for the next meeting and get it on the agenda.
Great idea.
Yeah, that was very helpful. And even though council may not be able to vote on it, we can at least discuss it in council and get a sense of where the council is going to go. And that's helpful.
And if you could just clarify the schedule in the packet. It says it's the May and June meeting. There is no meeting in May or June. as well as February, no February meeting.
But it also says May 9th meeting. I had the same thought exactly, so I'm glad you brought that up, Ben.
So let's check with Shali. So definitely no February meeting, and that's because we're having the city selection committee meeting. But let's ask Shali, the executive director, why we have no meeting for May.
We don't have a meeting for May, trying to think.
Are we having city selection?
City selection.
Oh, okay. No, it's not. The selection committee meeting will be in October, November. I don't recall now why it took the May one off.
But it also says there's a meeting on May 9th.
So if you look at it, the executive committee, when they meet on April 26th, they are setting the agenda for the May 9th meetings. Right? And so when the executive committee meets on May 24th, it's because we have our June annual membership event. So they're working on that.
So I see. So there is a May meeting.
It's May 9th.
Right. I would take out May no meeting and just do dashes there. I see, but because there, yeah.
Sorry, it's confusing.
No, Shelley, we
No
get it.
board meeting and no LAC meeting.
No, the dashes are because there are May meetings.
Yeah.
And then for October, the reason why we have, and it actually should say tentative, because remember we had talked about this. Because by mid-October, the governor would have signed the bills. And so whenever we've had LAC meetings in October, it's really just to do a recap of the year. And so it's up to the chair and you guys if you want in October. So October is tentative. So we can amend those for the board later. And
Thanks for asking the question.
I was a little confused.
You're creating that confusion.
The May one got me as well when I was responding to Rob's question, so this is very helpful. That's why I always believe in teamwork. We get more achieved and in a better manner. Other questions for Nisa? We're still on item 3. Seeing none, let's open for public comment if we have any.
No comments.
Okay, close the public comment. We're back to the committee, item number 3, last call. Seeing none, moving on to the last item, which is 2024 LAC agenda and calendar for the election. We touched upon this and covered this under item number 3, but I'm sure our executive director has some thoughts.
I just wanted to tell everyone that once the board votes on the meeting calendar and approves it, then I will send out calendar invitations for the rest of the year. And if you're the LAC representative, you'll be in the required list, and then the alternate will be in the option list.
And the other request I think you had was if the list of LAC members is incorrect, please send her an email so that she can update that. Because I know different cities have different times to update the assignments list. And somebody was asking me earlier about another assignment, different organization, and I figured that's relevant here as well. It's that time of the year. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions? If not, the meeting is adjourned at 6:49. Wonderful, perfect time. Thank you all so much.
the board meeting will start at 7.
There's some food in the back of the room.
Okay, Nisa, can I just make a quick announcement for the legislative address? So, sorry, just really quick, it's a non-agenda item, but I don't know how many people are attending the CASCC conference next week. So the Peninsula Division, I'm the president, Ellen, Mountain View. We're hosting a lunch for the Peninsula Division, so please come and meet other members from our division. We have over 30 people from our division who will be there, so it'll be a great opportunity to mingle. It's gonna be Wednesday. And then I was just approving an email that will go out to you all shortly if you're on our list. And then we're having a legislator address. So last year when Nisa was president, we had a legislator address in San Francisco. This year it'll be Palo Alto at HP. We've invited all of our legislators to come give us a preview, and since you all are on LAC, I'm sure it's of interest. And please RSVP. You'll also get an email shortly from the division on that to attend. So just wanted to share those 2 opportunities, and if you want to share with your colleagues as well, we already have over 60 RSVPs for that event and about 4 confirmed legislators.
For the Friday evening.
Perfect, okay.
I was just checking when we'll be back after lunch. So we have enough time.
It'll be done by lunchtime.
Yeah.
On Friday for the conference, if you're going.
So I think some of us, at least the two of us that are going from Saratoga, we were looking at the timing and.
At least it's in Palo Alto and not South San Francisco.
Thank you.
That's pretty far.
Thank you.
Yes, we're trying to rotate the different counties and cities, spread the love.
Yeah, I'm just.
Actually, very good group. It's our council.
Hi, Mariah, we met Thursday. I'm our partner, Mariah. Nice to meet you. I brought you a packet.
This one being. Okay, I will see.
Better than what is in there.
I didn't send an email.
Okay.
For a webinar.
Yeah, I'm wasting time.
Gabbing it up.
That's awesome. I'll be there on Friday. I can't be there next week, but yeah. Look, I'm doing the peninsula now, so.
I tried to meet my daughter.
Yeah, no, that's good. So are you gonna be covering?
Yeah, we're all here.
Meet you. Yeah. I'll see you the next one. All right, take care. See you. Oh, no, please, thank you.
Grab a little dinner.
It sounds very out there for providing them. Yeah.
Hey, the headlines better. Because for some reason, my colleague and on the whole team, we get better the type of one saving.
Right. Yeah, I right. I know a lot of our partners, sort of nationwide, when they partner with law enforcement, probably have that program because it's engaged by this. We don't have that. We generally don't do that, but maybe as a partnership for something that, if they think that's helpful, like. Talking about that. Saying that. Yeah, I'm even saying that, like, he's running after, but maybe come up with. Get out, like. Quietly, let's get grab it. Yeah, we're all, we had a meeting yesterday. We've already, we had a meeting yesterday. Yeah. We're about to make really. I'm gonna be like, okay. Yeah, and then I made a joke about being better than. You're never getting me alcohol again, like, God. Well, I think we agree.
We don't build any of those.
We're basically are just switching out. She was president of our division last year and that was. Okay. And then about we're gonna get that we have permission. That's what Mike, they could capture that. Mike is the like my only we're oh my God, that's like rich. Yeah. Like, you love it. We don't have any love. No, we don't need why, you know.
Back from the committee. So we've been.
Right now, for Apple.
They are. Yeah. Right. Or you can be loud and not be on the phone. Exactly.
Good. Why did you cancel our meeting? Oh, he is super sick. I didn't know he was cute. The poor guy.
He was like, actually, finally met in person.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
He's like, I can't wait to meet you. I was like, oh, we participate. Yeah, he sent me a message.
He drug himself into work. He got an executive officer. Like, could barely get involved. I don't think I feel like it is people. That's what I'm saying. Anytime you don't eat your dinner, you're like very weak. You're like, that was my kid. I'll never. I go, we'll reschedule.
But I'm trying to, we got really good feedback. Thanks for connecting. Yeah, they're renewing, they talked to the county, they're renewing their license, the county's down, so it'll be awesome. Me every year, like, so it's great.
That's
So,
fantastic.
but I'm gonna bring all of my team back to the meeting with you all, so you can hear like everything. Where they are all at.
It's
So, they're cool with you.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's great. Thank you again.
I know.
City manager.
I've never met you. I'm having city center.
Where did we get your pizza from? I can't tell from the box.
Yeah, Mountain Mike. Mountain Mike.
What the Mountain View? No. Oh, one up here, nice.
I'm ready. I'll meet you in the meeting.
The back. 30.
The other one. For us, we're our own JTA, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. You're driving down here a lot lately.
Yeah, Republic Day on the 22nd. Oh.
Wow. You meet tonight, right?
Yeah, I'll be there for that. Well. Oh, I can welcome you. Good.
Oh, yeah.